What's happening, everybody? Justin, Bridgewater's finest on YouTube, blockbuster_guy on Twitter, fueled as always by the incredible folks at Nerd Teas. There's a reason I don't have a cup of tea, and I'll get into it here in a second. But welcome to week 7 of my weekly CFL football pick show for the 2022 CFL season. And as you can tell, the setting has changed. The dress has changed. I'm in my work shirt still from earlier today. And this is just us kind of taking a second to kind of press the reset button here. There's a couple of reasons for this. I'll get into one of them a little bit later, but primarily last week was our first truly bad week of the CFL season in 2022, only going 4-8 with the picks last week. So really quite bad, and not a week that we've been used to on the show so far this season. So yeah, only 4-8. That included only going 1-3 straight up, and that was the Hamilton game. That was the Hamilton game that they had to come from behind and win very, very late in that game, but we only went 1-3 straight up, still even money 2-2 against the spread, and only went 1-3 on the totals. That's been a little more like it from the last couple of years with my totals. So was a bad week at 4-8. We wash our hands of it and we move on. That's what we do in this game. You can't get bogged down by individual performances. 2022 overall, we're still flying, man. 17-6 straight up, 16-7 against the spread, and 13-10 on the total. So we're above water in all three of those areas. 46-23, 2 out of 3 ain't bad on the season. CFL fantasy football for 2022 didn't have the greatest performance last week either. Only brought in 69.7 points, which is a down week compared to how we've been doing so far on the season. My MVP, once again, Saskatchewan running back Jamal Morrow. No big surprise there. 11 carries for 77 yards rushing and 4 catches for 29 yards and a receiving touchdown in Touchdown Atlantic last week. It was good for 20.6 points, so it was a little under 1/3 of my full point total for the week there, just coming from Jamal Morrow himself. Has me at 522.5 on the season. I did drop down 2 spots now into 10th place in the official Atlantic Schooners CFL Fantasy Football League. So 10th place out of 47. It's not too bad, but not as good as we had it just a few days ago. Sorry, I had to shut the hall light off there. Had a little exorcism thing going on back there, but that's okay. We trail first place now by 92.8 points, so we only lost 2 points worth of value versus the team that's in first place, but we still did move backwards. And we actually now only lead 20th place by 58.5, so we actually lost ground against the team in 20th place. We don't want to do that too often. We still got a very healthy lead, but we don't want to get into those kinds of problems. Now, that leads us right into week 7 in CFL fantasy football, and my lineup is right in front of your eyes right now. So we are obviously heavily stacking the BC Lions, and we are also heavily stacking the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. So we're going to go with Nathan Rourke at quarterback. It's the first time this season that I've been able to use Nathan Rourke, and I thought he was worth the money. We're going to be stacking him with James Butler at running back, as well as Keon Hatcher, one of his most active wide receivers. So we're grabbing that 3-person stack there. And in terms of the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, we're going to run with Brady Oliveira at running back simply because Johnny Augustine is on their injured report. Johnny Augustine may not play this week. That is going to open up opportunities there for Brady Oliveira. What I will say is there's a good chance that if Johnny Augustine does become on track to play in this game, I'll probably swap Oliveira out for Walter Fletcher. They have very similar price tags. Walter Fletcher is going to be getting the start in Montreal's game against Ottawa. And I'm going to grab those 2 now like newly developed, or I guess newly featured wide receivers for the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. That's Carlton Agudosi, who obviously had a massive CFL debut last week, and Dalton Schoen. I think Winnipeg's aerial game is going to be on point in this one, so we're going to take both Agudosi and Dalton Schoen. We may not have any Greg Ellingson this week, which does definitely play into things as well. Going to be rocking no defense again because it is #overseason. Week 7 in the CFL looks like this. We got the Calgary Stampeders on the natural bye this week. Montreal is in Ottawa, Alouettes at the Red Blacks. Hamilton is in BC taking on the Lions. We've got Winnipeg in Edmonton taking on the Elks. And the Toronto Argos and Saskatchewan Roughriders are rematching Touchdown Atlantic, this time in Saskatchewan, but maybe not because COVID is running through that Roughriders locker room. Genuinely, I think we're going to see a postponement here, but we're going to talk about the game anyway in case the game does get played on time. So let's start in that Montreal-Ottawa game. Montreal 1-4 on the season, losers of 2 straight games, dropping a single-point decision, 32-31 against Edmonton last week. That game was in Montreal. The offense dried up in the fourth quarter. They were outscored 14-0 in that fourth quarter, and punt away, honestly, what should have been a victory for them. They played well enough through the first 3 quarters of that game. They should have won that football game. It's a punt. The Alouettes fired Kahari Jones for a few different reasons, but one of the primary ones was lack of disciplinary responsibility. So then in their first game out, with Danny Machocha as the new head coach, what did they take? 13 penalties for 193 yards. It's almost 2 full football fields just of penalty yardage. And the defense was responsible for 133 of those. Do I have to say anything else? The Alouettes this season are the definition of a glass cannon. They score at the number 4 rate in the CFL. So they're middle of the pack. The Alouettes can score some points, but their defense allows points at the 3rd highest rate in the CFL. So they can score, but they're having plenty of points scored against them. The definition of a glass cannon, dangerous to go with them. Meanwhile, in Ottawa, the Red Blacks are still looking for their first win on the season, now sitting at 0-5 after dropping that 2-point decision in Hamilton against the Ticats. But look, this is the Red Blacks' 4th game in 5 so far this season where they hung around and they had a shot at this thing at the end of the game. That's all you can ask for a team that's trying to move up from what the Red Blacks have been over the last few seasons, which is really not good and probably inarguably the worst team in the CFL over that period of time. They've hung around. They've been right there. They've had opportunities to win 4 of their 5 games this year late. So this is a team that's improving, whether the record reflects that or not. Caleb Evans got the start in this game, and look, I've had somebody in my comments, he's not in my comments anymore because he got blocked, but I've had somebody in my comments that really can't leave it alone, that I was awfully excited last season about Caleb Evans, and look, I understand. He was all hail the king, I get it, my that thumbnail exists on a video from last year, and I still think for the state that the Ottawa Red Blacks were in last season, I still think Caleb Evans was the best player for the job, and he wound up leading the team in passing yards and passing touchdowns last year. So I'm going to kind of do that a little bit because I think I was right in that estimation. Caleb Evans leaves plenty to be desired throwing the football. He only completed 60% of his passes last week. He had a throwing touchdown. He threw 2 interceptions and only threw for 203 yards. He had 62 yards on 8 carries and 2 rushing touchdowns. He's a weapon back there. I think Ottawa is one of these teams that you could start seeing really start to employ those 2 quarterback sets. I think Ottawa could do some really interesting things with a weapon like Caleb Evans and, Masoli when he's healthy again, but whoever they kind of want to put in there as their second quarterback option. I think you can see Ottawa really start to develop that 2 quarterback system. But on an offense where points really come at a premium, they're only scoring 19.2 points per game so far this year, and they only have 8 offensive touchdowns. Points come at a premium in Ottawa. You need a weapon like Caleb Evans, and you also need that defense to hold you in football games. The Red Blacks are the latest team that's been stuck with that unfortunate 2 games in 5 days scheduling. They played the late game on Saturday, and now they play the early game on Thursday, so it's really, really not fair to them. I think that's probably enough to tilt this into the Alouettes' favor in this game. So I'm going to go with the Montreal Alouettes here. They're a very marginal favorite on the road. I'm going to go with Montreal to win this game. Let's take the Alouettes on the road in Ottawa to beat the Red Blacks. As I mentioned, they're a marginal favorite. Montreal laying 2.5 points here as the road favorite. I like them to win. It's a relatively small price to pay. I'm going to go ahead and lay the 2.5 points on the Montreal Alouettes. Try to not take as many penalties this week, maybe. Which, by the way, I really should point out, the Ottawa Redblacks took no penalties in their game last week. I don't know that I've ever seen a penalty ledger with zeros. Like it was fantastic. It was incredible. I think they also won the turnover battle by like +3 or something. Somebody had put that in my comments last week, and I can't remember who it was. I think it was Adam. I think Adam put that in my comments late, and it's, I mean, incredible. Like incredible to go a whole game. Like, you committed penalties. You just didn't get called for any of them. But it's still incredible to go a whole game and not get called any penalties. That's pretty cool. And to win the turnover battle by 3, they probably deserve to win that football game. And maybe I even should have taken them this week. But we're going to take Montreal, and we're going to lay the points. Total in the game set at 47.5 points. Games averaged 52.5 points last week. Hashtag over season. They're averaging 51 on the season. Hashtag over season. Hashtag over season reigns. Let's go over 47.5 points. It doesn't take that much to get there in the CFL. In Montreal and Ottawa, let's go Alouettes 27, Redblacks 23. Alouettes win, and Alouettes cover the spread. Let's go to BC now. The Hamilton Tiger Cats and the BC Lions. Hamilton 1-4 on the season, picking up their first win of the year, that 2-point win against the Ottawa Redblacks. Dane Evans came an inch from giving this thing away again with that late fumble. Scary, scary times for Ticats backers, but they get the win 25-23. They were still outscored in the second half. It was closer this time, 13-7. They still got the job done. Now, despite that late turnover, I think this was clearly Dane Evans' best game of this CFL season. 75% on his passes, 342 yards through the air, which I believe is his second highest total of the season. I think he had a 425 earlier in the season. 2 touchdowns, but most importantly, no interceptions. His first game of the season where he did not throw multiple interceptions. He'd thrown 2 picks in every game of the season up to that point last week. He also had 44 passing yards on that game-winning drive. Make no mistake about it, for any criticism you can throw at Dane Evans this season, he won that football game. Now, I want to tell you a real quick story, and this is a lesson in use of the internet. All right, like this is a lesson in use of the internet and being responsible for the things that come out of your mouth while on the internet. And there are plenty of you, and I'm including myself in this. I'm not above you here in any way, but there's plenty of you that need to hear this lesson. So, as I'm watching that game last week, Hamilton and Ottawa, there was a point in the game, it was late. Hamilton was down 5, I think. I think it was 23-18. And Alden Darby, defensive back for the Hamilton Ticats, makes a stop on first down, and he gets up. And at the time when I looked at it, I was like, he's like taunting the player that he stopped. I think in retrospect, I think he was just celebrating. But in the heat of the moment, it looked like taunting to me. And I'm looking at the situation, I'm like, you haven't won a game yet this year. You're down by 5 to another team that hasn't won a game this year. Like, what are you doing? So I went on Twitter and I said that. And I didn't tag Alden Darby in it because I'm not that kind of person where I think athletes need to hear what I have to say about them. Like, that's just like on Twitter, like on social media, like tagging somebody and shit talking them. That's not what I do. But I did put his name in the tweet. And the result of that was either he was kind of searching for mentions of himself on Twitter, that's a possibility, or what I would like to think is, I think there's some people in CFL offices who are aware of this show, and somebody may have passed the tweet on to him. I don't know. It could be one or the other. But he responded to that tweet. He called me a weirdo, told me to keep his name out of his mouth, and I was like, you know what? Fair enough. I thought the response was kind of funny. I liked the tweet. I was like, you know what? You're probably right. I woke up the next morning and I noticed that Alden Darby had followed me on Twitter. And then I also noticed I had a DM from him. And I thought, oh boy, what's going on here? And genuinely, without, like, I'm not going to go into the logistics of the entirety of the DM, but it was a genuine human interaction. Like, it was giving his perspective on things and saying, like, look, this is where we're at. We're trying to win football games. Not like he had to justify himself to me in that moment, because he certainly didn't. But the fact that he took the time and actually had a human interaction with someone who he has no reason to have that interaction with me. Who am I? I'm a guy with 1,000 followers on Twitter who has a CFL show on YouTube. He's under no obligation to talk to me at all, to talk to me, period. I was like, I'm so thoroughly impressed with the way that he handled that as a pro athlete. Like, I was being a dummy. Like, I'll just say it. I was being a dummy. It turned what was a negative interaction into an incredibly positive one. And I don't know how many more games the Ticats win this year, but I'm very much pulling for Alden Darby. Like, I want Alden Darby to win, like, Defensive Player of the Year. Like, I'm really pulling for him as an individual now, and it genuinely made me think twice about some of the stuff that I might say and put on the internet, because it's important for us all to be responsible for the things that we say, especially during this era, during this time period that we're all living in, the stuff that we've all lived through over the last few years. And I know you know exactly what I'm talking about. You're very responsible for the things that you say online, whether you think you're responsible for them or not. People see it. And you are responsible for the things that you say and do. So I'd like to thank Alden Darby here for kind of reminding me of that and having a fantastic interaction with me that really changed my perspective on some things. So I just thought that was a cool story, wanted to share. But back to the game. The BC Lions, now 3-1 on the season. They're coming into this game off of their bye, and they're coming off of that big loss against the Winnipeg Blue Bombers 2 weeks ago, 43-22. The offense wasn't clicking the way it normally is. The defense wasn't clicking the way it had been up to this point in the season. And it was possibly as simple as don't spot the Winnipeg Blue Bombers the first 24 points of the game. Now, what I will say on the Lions, to the Lions' credit, Nathan Rourke played angry in that game. After they were down those first 24 points, he played angry. Had a couple of quick touchdown drives in succession. They kind of looked like they were cooking with gas there in the second quarter, right at the end of the first half. But they came out the second half, and Winnipeg had adjusted, and it's just sometimes against a team that's as well coached as that and with the caliber of players that the Bombers have, you're just not going to make up that deficit, and they just didn't. But I wanted to give it to Nathan Rourke. He still had 3 passing touchdowns in that game, and Dominique Rhymes too. 6 catches, $136, and 2 of those 3 scores. Rourke tried. We'll give it to him. He definitely did not give up in that game, but too little too late for the Leos. I expect in this game, I do expect Nathan Rourke and the BC Lions to have all the time in the world to make plays. The Lions have only allowed 3 quarterback sacks all season long. So that is far and away the best mark in the CFL. And then when you look on the other side, the Ticats, they've only registered 9 quarterback sacks this season, which I believe is the lowest mark so far in the CFL this season. So that is an area I think where the Lions are going to be able to dominate in this game, is at the line of scrimmage. And if Hamilton can't find a way to put some pressure on Nathan Rourke, force Nathan Rourke to make some mistakes, I think it's going to be a long night. At the end of the day, the Lions have had to sit on that, you ain't quite there yet, kid, game for 2 weeks. And that, if I was a Lions player, would piss me off. It would really drive me nuts. So even without Bo Lacombo, who's not going to be playing in this game for them in the linebacker core, my expectation is they come out firing in this game and pretty well empty the tank. So I expect the BC Lions to have themselves a pretty darn good game on offense and pick up the win here. Let's take the BC Lions at home against Hamilton. Now on the line, the Lions are laying 8 points here as the home favorite. It's a big number. I definitely think twice before laying this kind of number, but it's the Lions and they're averaging 40 points a game. So if there's a team that I feel comfortable laying these amount of points on, it's going to be the BC Lions. So let's lay the points here. Take the BC Lions -8 against Hamilton. Total in the game is 52. It's the BC Lions who are averaging 40 points a game. I mean, it's the best offense in the CFL. Hamilton's offense has been picking it up lately. Their defense does give up some points. So even though it's the biggest number of the week, I do think this thing goes over. So we're going to go over 52 points in BC Hamilton. Let's go Lions 34, Ticats 24. Still a competitive game, but I got the Lions covering the spread, and I think the game goes over. Now, before we move on, I want to take this opportunity, as I always do, to remind you of my great friends and sponsors at Nerd Teas. We're going to be shouting them out. And yes, I do not have a cup of tea with me today, and that is because it is 30 degrees outside. I'm recording this in my basement, which is significantly cooler than it is upstairs, but I think if I tried to make myself a hot cup of tea, I would not be able to do it. And I don't really have a blend right now that I think is super conducive to cold tea. Watermelon would be the closest one, but nerdteas.ca is where you need to go to find dozens and dozens of incredible loose leaf tea blends and accessories. Blends like the one I got in my hand here, which is blueberry, which is the blend that you saw me drinking last week. Nerdteas.ca is a fantastic, locally owned small business in Woodstock, Ontario, Canada. And if you use my promo code, which is BWFinest, you are going to be able to save 15% at checkout at nerdteas.ca. You're also going to get free shipping in Canada on any order over $100. And for my listeners and viewers in the United States, you get a great conversion rate on the US dollar. nerdteas.ca, BWFinest is that promo code. Get your free shipping, save your 15%, find yourself something to love, or find someone you love something to love. You can do it on nerdteas.ca. All right, we're officially into the back half of the week. We got the Winnipeg Blue Bombers in Edmonton taking on the Elks. Winnipeg a perfect 6-0 on the season, winning a 26-19 game against the Calgary Stampeders. That game was in Winnipeg last week. That had a really bizarro finish to it, where Calgary looked like they had the touchdown to tie the game. Receiver goes to the ground, ball pops up in the air. All of a sudden, it's an interception. And that's the game. So Calgary was that close to tying things up with the Bombers, sending that game to overtime potentially, where absolutely anything can happen in the CFL. This week was proof that absolutely anything can happen in the CFL. I'm just hoping I got all my bad voodoo out in 1 week. What a football game on both sides. It was everything that I kind of hoped that Winnipeg, BC would have been the week before. Just a fantastic football game on both sides. But for the Bombers, a masterclass in controlling the football. 37-15 time of possession for Winnipeg, despite the fact that they were under 7 yards per play, both on first down and on second down, but Calgary had nothing for them in terms of stopping them on second down. They had them in advantageous second down situations. They couldn't stop them from converting. That was the motif of the entire game, was Calgary just had nothing for them trying to stop them on second down. They lead the CFL, do the Blue Bombers, in average time of possession at well over 33 minutes per game. Part of the reason why they're 6-0, let's face it. So the obvious shout out here for the Bombers is Carlton Agudosi. What a CFL debut. He's a big body, I think 6'6", 220 as a wide receiver. He's a big dude, and he dropped 70 yards on 6 catches and 2 touchdowns in his CFL debut. He might be coming in here to feast. Greg Ellingson also had 11 catches for $152. Like I mentioned, we may not see a Greg Ellingson in this game. Is this the definition of a trap game? It absolutely is. The best offense and the best defense statistically in the CFL against statistically one of the worst offenses and probably the worst defense. Is this a look-ahead game? Probably. The Bombers have Calgary again next week, and it's in Calgary. So could Winnipeg potentially be looking ahead to that Calgary game? Absolutely. But come on. We're definitely going to be on the Winnipeg Blue Bombers here to extend their record to 7-0 this season. Edmonton does not play well in their home building. They just, or at least the last little while, they have not played well in their home building. I just can't, I can't take them against the champs, man. They don't have the defense, I don't think, to keep up with the things that Winnipeg can do on offense, the weapons that Winnipeg has. Even if Greg Ellingson doesn't play in this game, they've just got these emerging wide receivers that Collaros spreads the ball around enough, somebody's going to be the hero. Could it finally be Rashid Bailey, who has had a very slow start to this season? Drew Wolotarski is another option. It's going to be somebody. Now, Winnipeg is laying 7.5 points against the spread here as a heavy road favorite. You got to really look at that. Heavy road favorites doesn't work out great a lot of the time, but we're going to go ahead and lay the points here on Winnipeg. It's a decent sized spread. The Elks defense, again, it's just not on this level, almost regardless of who's going to be out there. If Zach Collaros is playing and that Winnipeg defense is humming along, sorry, it's just not going to be Edmonton's week. So we're going to lay the 7.5 points on Winnipeg. Total in the game is 47.5. It's not the smallest total of the week. That's coming in the later game, but it is still a relatively small total in the midst of #overseason. I am still going to go under on it, though. We're going to go under. I don't love it because it is a really achievable number. Without Greg Ellingson, you may see the point total kind of stay down, but I genuinely think this Bombers defense is just ready to have one of those nuclear football games where they're just untouchable. I feel like they're kind of due for that. I think that might be coming this week. So we're going to stick under 47.5 points in Winnipeg. Edmonton, let's go Bombers 30, Elks 14. Winnipeg wins and covers comfortably, and I think the game stays under the 47.5 point total. And the last game we're going to look at is the rematch of Touchdown Atlantic that may or may not happen in Saskatchewan at Mosaic Stadium. The Toronto Argos in town taking on the Riders. Now, I have to consider this back-to-back road games for the Argos simply because, yes, they were technically the home team last week, but the game was in Nova Scotia. So both teams had to travel for that. I'm calling it back-to-back road games. If you don't agree, too bad. It's my show. So, Toronto 2-2 on the season. They picked up that win last week in Touchdown Atlantic 30-24. They win an opportunistic penalty-filled affair. Both teams were in the double digits in penalties, well over 100 penalty yards. It was just a really scrappy affair to the point that Duke Williams is going to be suspended for the rematch. So no Duke Williams for the Saskatchewan Roughriders, even if this game does take place. For Toronto, they were dominant in areas last week that were the ones that mattered most. The turnover battle, they won 3-1. The line of scrimmage, they had 5 quarterback sacks. Saskatchewan had 0. Otherwise, this was a very, very close game that once again ended on some weird shenanigans where Cody Fajardo overthrows a pass by a little bit. It's tipped by one of his receivers. It literally lands on an Argos player that's on the ground. And all of a sudden, there's the game-sealing interception. Cody Fajardo, I believe, threw 3 interceptions in that game. When I talk about that in a little bit, one of them went back to the house for 6 points. So the week was just all over the place, right? It's tough to handicap stuff like that happening. It will occasionally happen. That's why I hope it was just kind of all condensed into the 1 week. However, the Argos, there are things to watch out for here. They are a league worst sub 27 minutes time of possession on average this season. They're not possessing the ball nearly enough, in my opinion, and they have a reliance on these splash scoring plays, and eventually that does run out. It doesn't often last forever. We can point to the BC game with Winnipeg 2 weeks ago. Sometimes that works, but a lot of the times it runs out, especially against good defenses. The Riders lost last week 30-24, drops them to 4-2 on the season. Fajardo throwing 3 interceptions. They proved too costly. He's also now dealing with an injury. He got hit low. That was the cause of a lot of the continuing issues last week and part of why there were so many penalties. So Cody Fajardo, it's a 50-50 whether he's going to play. So it's 50-50 whether he's going to play. I would say the game is 50-50 about whether it's actually going to happen on time. So I would handicap Fajardo's ability or likelihood of playing probably somewhere around 25%. I think that math works out. The story of this Riders offense, man, is just a wide array of weapons. And I think I mentioned it last week. They're about to get Kyron Moore back, hopefully within the next couple of weeks. So, boy, watch out for this offense. But look, KSB and Duke Williams combining for 12 catches for 180 yards receiving. Duke hauling in a receiving touchdown last week. But the offense flows through Jamal Morrow. 15 touches, 106 all-purpose yards last week. He had a receiving touchdown as well. Just so many weapons weapons and so many options on this Riders offense as long as the game gets played. The Riders are also the CFL's number 2 scoring defense, and this defense is really, really good in Mosaic Stadium. They have only allowed 7 touchdowns on the season to opposing offenses, which is really good. But again, COVID is running through this team. We don't know who's going to play and who isn't. So many question marks heading into this one. Can I be honest here? Circle of trust. We're all friends. Under normal circumstances, I would have taken this game Riders by 30. Genuinely. In a revenge spot at home where your defense is nuclear white hot, I would have taken the Riders by any number of points here. But with the COVID situation, with the Duke Williams suspension, with the likelihood that Cody Fajardo doesn't play, even if the game does play, I think it would be Mason Fine, who is the backup quarterback there in Saskatchewan. With so many of those factors playing in, if this game gets played, I have to take the Argos because they just don't have all of these issues leaning against their side of the ledger heading into this game. So we're going to take Toronto here to upset Saskatchewan. Saskatchewan's a moderate favorite here at home. We're going to take the Argos to win this thing, sweeping the season series with the Riders for the first time since, I believe, 2015. I'm pretty sure I read that on the CFL website this afternoon. On the line, the Riders are laying 5.5 points here as a home favorite. I totally understand it, but with everything that's going on, this line is a gift. So grab this line before it moves because this line is a gift. So Argos plus 5.5 is definitely the way to go in this one, especially where I like them to win outright. Total in the game is set at 46.5 points, which is the lowest total of the week. Now, considering all of the things that are going against Saskatchewan and considering how good the defense is, once again, apologies if I sound like a broken record, I really wanted to take the under here. Like, I really wanted to take the under because it's like, man, that defense is really good. And were it not especially for the COVID situation, then that's probably the way I would have gone here. I probably would have taken Saskatchewan to win the game, like I mentioned, and probably would have stuck under on it because I would have expected their defense to pitch a gem. But given the uncertainty, I got to go over on it. This is a play on the number, not the situation. Just there's so many points being scored in the CFL right now. So I have to go over the 46.5, even against an elite defense at home in Saskatchewan, Toronto. Let's go Argos 27 and Riders 20, I think is the way we'll go with this. Toronto gets the win. Toronto obviously covers against the spread. Game goes over. There you go, folks. Those are your picks for hopefully lucky week number 7 in the CFL in 2022. We'll go over them here with you one more time. I've got Montreal beating Ottawa by a score of 27-23. I'm laying the 2.5 points with the road Alouettes in a game that goes over 47.5 points. I got the BC Lions at home beating Hamilton by 10, 34-24, which means I'm laying 8 points with the BC Lions against the spread, and the game goes over the 52-point total. I got the Winnipeg Blue Bombers in Edmonton to beat the Elks. We are laying 7.5 points on the Blue Bombers on the road here in a game that stays under 47.5, our only under of this week. And we got the Toronto Argos going to Saskatchewan and upsetting the Riders by a final score of 27-20, which means we're taking the 5.5 points on the Argos in a game that goes just barely over 46.5 points. Thank you so much for watching and taking the time with, as I say every single week. I mean, it does mean the world to me that people are so interested in this show, so invested above and beyond how they have been in years past. If you saw any of the shenanigans that were going on in the comments section of last week's video, I have to apologize because clearly the person that was making the comments is in kind of a bad state with the way they act online and kind of drug me down into that area too. Like, I could be that way. I can certainly be that way. But they kind of drug me into it as well. And I didn't like the version of myself that I was being in those comments, if I'm being perfectly brutally honest. There's, again, circle of trust. We're all friends here. So if you saw any of that, my apologies. Hopefully it doesn't happen again. I did what I felt like I had to do, not only for my channel, but for the other person that's on the other end of this. That's it for me, Justin, Bridgewater's Finest on YouTube, Blockbuster_guy on Twitter, fueled as always by the incredible folks at Nerd Tees. Thank you so much for watching the Week 7 episode. We'll see you again for Week 8, where hopefully our pressing of the reset button means that we're back on track with the results and the success of the picks and the season as a whole. We'll see you again in Week 8.